Hello there everybody, it is Toby here from TIJ Music and welcome to a new video. Today it is time for another album review of one of my favourite groups, Kiss. Now, I'm trying to review all of their classic albums, but I'm certainly going about it in a roundabout way. I did Love Gun last year, I did the self-titled debut a couple of months back, and today we are covering Rock and Roll Over. So it's fair to say that I'm going in a bit of a roundabout way about reviewing these classic albums. But I picked this up today. I thought, I fancy listening to Rock and Roll Over, and we'll do a review of it as well. Fantastic cover art. I absolutely love the cover art. You can see also on the reverse as well. And this being one of those albums, if you hold it up either way, it still works. But Gene and Paul are on the top. I don't think many would disagree with that. But of course, Rock and Roll Over, which I'll just put over here and hope it doesn't drop off, we'll just leave it there. But Rock and Roll Over, of course, the follow-up to their release in the same year of March 1976, Destroyer. And the band were very much in between a rock and a hard place here because Destroyer was so successful, but it was a big way away from their first three albums. Those first three albums were very raw. The production wasn't great on them, of course. That's what we saw on the Alive album, which was their big hit really in 1975, and Destroyer in 76 really added to that. So do they keep with this more orchestral sound that Bob Ezrin produced, or do they go back to the more raw sound? And fortunately, I think, at least for me, they went back to this raw sound, and they worked with Eddie Kramer to produce this album, who went on to produce their next album as well, Love Gun, and also their second version of the Alive album, aptly named Alive 2. This actually sold fairly similarly to Destroyer. I was quite surprised to see this, but this was really at the height of Kiss's fame, at least in the US, of course. This album behind me went platinum in January of 1977. Now, this was released in November of 76. Remember that. There was only 8 months between Destroyer and Rock and Roll Over. But there are a few events in between, which I'll talk about in just a second. So this went platinum in January of 77. Destroyer went platinum in November of 76. So just 2 months between when the albums went platinum. However, 8 months between when the albums were released. But Destroyer has now gone to double platinum, no surprise there, as of 2011. Destroyer was very much aided by the release of the big single Beth in August of 76, and when it was first released it went out the charts very quickly, but when Beth started getting more airplay, then of course the album went up the charts again. But they also appeared on the Paul Lynde Halloween special of 1976. This introduced Kiss to a much larger audience, and Rock and Roll Over perfectly capitalised on this by being by being released in the few weeks after. I think it was sort of mid-November 76, so only a couple of weeks after the appearance on the Paul Lynde Halloween special. So that was really good for them. Now, the cover art is by artist Michael Dore, or Doret, don't quite know how you pronounce that. He also worked with Kiss on Sonic Boom from 2009. You can see that between the two covers, hopefully I'll get a picture of Sonic Boom just up here. They're very similar, the two covers. Now, funnily enough, I think this, before we go to start, is an underrated gem. I also think Sonic Boom is an underrated gem as well. So, similarities there between the two albums. And I'm hoping to do a review of Sonic Boom at some point. I'd like to get a physical version of the album. Certainly not the LP, it's free figures, but hopefully I can get the CD fairly cheap, even though it's not so readily available, accessible over here in the UK. But I'm hoping to get a version of that. But I do really like the Sonic Boom album, so I'll be talking about that at some point. But let's get into the album. So on side 1, we've got I Want You, Take Me, Calling Dr. Love, Ladies Room, and Baby Driver. And then on side 2, Love 'Em and Leave 'Em, Mr. Speed, Hard Luck Woman, Makin Love, and I've missed one somewhere. What have I missed? See You in Your Dreams. I didn't have to pick the album, I'm very proud of myself there. But yeah, this is one of my favourite albums from Kiss. There's so little to choose between the 6 classic albums, going from the self-titled debut all the way to Love Gun. Personally, I'd probably put Dress to Kill at the bottom of that list. I'm not so au fait and not so, I wouldn't say familiar, but it just doesn't quite hit the same mark for me, Dress to Kill. But between the 5 albums that I haven't mentioned, of course, this one, Love Gun, self-titled debut, Hotter Than Hell, and Destroyer, there isn't much between them, and this, again, a very consistent release, as you'll see from the tracks that we'll talk through in detail. So for those of you who might not have watched one of my reviews before, we go through each 10 tracks, try and talk about them in a little bit more depth, and then give them a rating out of 10. After that, and after we finish the 10 tracks today, we'll get a verdict, which is the average of those tracks out of 10, which will then give an overall score of the album. Fairly easy, so let's get into it. So the first track on this album is I Want You. This is a Paul Stanley penned track, And he draws you in here with quite an acoustic feel. In the morning I raise my head. And yet you must be thinking when you first hear this album, what the hell is going on? Kiss have gone unplugged. It's like, this is like a foreshadow to 20 years later, what's going on here? But luckily the heavy stuff comes in pretty quickly. And already from the first few seconds you can see a change immediately from that Destroyer album. It's a far more raw sound from the earlier days, which I talked about earlier, that really could have fit onto the debut or maybe Dressed to Kill. I think that Hotter Than Hell is a little heavier, so maybe this track wouldn't have fit on that album. But nevertheless, great guitar licks here. 2 guitar solos in this track. One from Paul Stanley, one from Ace Frehley. Luckily I'd read up on that because I would have immediately thought it was from Ace Frehley. Both guitar solos, but no one of each from Paul and from Ace Frehley as well. But a real solid start to the album. Not one of my personal favourites from the album, but it's still solid, so it's an 8 out of 10. Track 2 then, Take Me. This is going to be a 9 out of 10. The typical catchy lyrics, this one co-written by Paul Stanley and Sean Delaney, who would also get credits for Mr. Speed and Makin Love. Sean Delaney worked with Kiss as kind of a producer, choreographer, jack of all trades really. But this is heavy in places, catchy, it's just the classic Kiss formula. I really like it a lot, so this one, a 9 out of 10. Track number 3, and we get to the Demons' first track, Gene Simmons. 10 out of 10. Calling Dr. Love. This is probably the most recognisable track from the album. Before I listened to this album in full, and in the days where I'd just got a greatest hits set of Kiss, this is on all the greatest hits sets, really. It's one of the most known Kiss tracks. I think it's been played a lot live. It's certainly in the top 20 tracks that have been played live. So it's probably the most recognisable track on this album, given of course it's a concert staple, as I've just said. It's a typical Gene Simmons track, really, with all the macho and bravado feel that you get, and he is Dr. Love after all. Again, catchy lyrics, awesome bass line from Gene Simmons, and an exquisite, short but sweet solo from Ace Frehley, which is really one of the trademarks of Ace Frehley's guitar playing. You know, you have to wonder why these guys ever split up. You know, the perfect formula, and that's repeated excellently here. And this track, at least, is a 10 out of 10, and absolutely essential Kiss. Track number 4, Ladies Room. I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. And you'll hear this a lot in my Kiss reviews of the classic albums. This one sounds better live. It does. But funnily enough, despite the production being better on this album than the first 3 albums, it still feels a little bit flat. It's catchy as hell though, and the chorus and the pre-chorus section absolutely rocks. Simply put, the Alive 2 version is louder, faster, all the rest of it, so it just adds to it really and makes it even better. But just like the previous track, it's typical Gene Simmons bravado. It's actually a reworking of a demo they did called Don't Want Your Romance. Alright, the studio version is a big step up from that demo. I'd actually be quite interested to hear who sung the backing vocals on that demo. I don't know whether... It can't be Gene Simmons, surely. It almost has a 60s soul feel. Interesting. It wouldn't have fit on this album, but it's an interesting bootleg or demo, or whatever you want to call it. Certainly a rarity. The live version is a 10, but seeing as we're not talking about the live version, this is a 9. And also, a little trivia fact. The phrase Ladies Room was used 14 times on this track, just so you knew this track was called Ladies Room. So the final track then from side 1 of the vinyl. Baby Driver, of course, this was the basis for the 2017 film of the same name. No, not really. Totally not the Simon and Garfunkel track of the same name. But for all the flack that Peter Criss gets about his drumming ability, of course his solo album as well, the tracks that he sings on from the classic era are usually pretty good. If you look at Hooligan from Love Gun, Getaway from Dressed to Kill, of course Black Diamond from the debut, and for all the ballad slack, Beth, Hard Luck Woman, which we'll talk about a little bit later, it's pretty good, and this one is another repeat of that. It's a reworking of a Peter Criss demo from his Pre-Kiss, not Peter Criss, Pre-Kiss band Lips. It's good, it's heavy, but it's just a little tad off for me to be perfect. I don't really know what it is, and I can't really describe it, but it just doesn't work as well for me. But it's not quite up to the rest of the side 1 standard, I feel. But it's still worthy of an 8 out of 10. It is certainly still a good track. So we move on then to side number 2, and this is the dud of the album, unfortunately for me anyway. Love 'Em and Leave 'Em. It's track number 6, and therefore it's a 6 out of 10. This is the third of 4 Gene Simmons penned tracks on this album, and as I said, it's what I believe is the weakest. Now, I know I said Ladies Room was repetitive, but this just takes the biscuit. it doesn't really go anywhere for me. It definitely didn't catch on live. It was played once on the album's tour, according to Setlist.fm, at the Savannah Civic Centre in Georgia. But I'm not even too sure about the guitar solo on this track. One thing you can say for most Kiss tracks that aren't too great is the guitar's always good. But yeah, it just doesn't quite feel right for me. It's not terrible, by all means, but it's definitely confined to a 6. And when I'm playing this on an iPod shuffle, I'm fairly guilty of skipping this one. And just a question for you down in the comments. Does anybody have an iPod these days? Or is it just me? I don't know. Track number 7, Mr. Speed, and this is back to true form, absolutely here, a 9 out of 10. There's no real correlation on this album, funnily enough, between Simmons and Stanley records being good or bad, and you do get that on some Kiss records, but this one, the quality is very consistent between generally most of the tracks. And I know I've just lambasted the previous one, I've said it was terrible for being repetitive, and this does share some of its qualities. But like some of the earlier tracks, it's catchy, it's got that constant guitar riff, which is catchy as hell, and it just works really. It's the common Kiss formula. And this is one I would rarely skip in an iPod shuffle. So it has to be a good sign. 9 out of 10. Track number 8, See You In Your Dreams. And once again, it's an 8 out of 10. For the track listing, of course. Number 8, and it's an 8 out of 10. This one also seems to get a little flack from reviews I've listened to, read or whatever, but I really like it. It's the final Gene Simmons pen track on the album. It's catchy. It features the words Dreams Tonight 23 times. But the guitars are really rocking here, they really are. Simmons sounds great. I think it's Paul Stanley on the backing vocals, and that trade-off between the two really works in my opinion. And once again, it's one for the classic Kiss formula, and this is why really this is just a consistent album generally speaking, apart from, you know, 1 or 2 tracks here and there. But just a quick word on the version from Gene Simmons' solo album. He put this on his solo album because he wasn't quite happy with the way that the version of this album sounded. Solo version's okay, but a little bit gimmicky with the female vocals, but it all adds to the Gene Simmons legend, of course. Penultimate track, not penultimate album. Technically it was the penultimate classic album, but whatever, I'm not getting myself out of that faux pas. We'll just roll with it. Track number 9 is Hard Luck Woman. Once again, another 8 out of 10. Now, clearly this was an intended follow-up hit from Beth. You know, the soft rock hit Beth from Destroyer. And Paul Stanley says that this is inspired by Rod Stewart's music, in particular Maggie May. You can definitely see the similarities between those tracks. And You Wear It Well from the Every Picture Tells a Story album. Look at me, I'm a Rod Stewart historian. But Brandy, the song by Looking Glass, served as the main inspiration here. And Stanley actually wanted Rod Stewart to sing this one, but given the success of Beth, they kept it as a follow-up, and the main single from this album wasn't quite as successful as Beth, but still made the top 20 of the US charts, so, you know, it was okay. Obviously, remember that these albums were only 8 months apart, so they really wanted to strike while the iron was hot here. Of course, it's a little bit softer than the rest of the album, but Peter Criss's voice suits that, and it's very strange, actually, that you think about it, that some of the heavier tracks, the likes of Black Diamond and Getaway, he suits those very well, and of course Baby Driver from this album that we talked about earlier. But then there's the softer tracks like this and Beth that his voice actually suits as well, and that's a credit to him. So, another good track, not the best, but another solid addition, and as I said, it was another 8 out of 10 for that one. Final track then, off the album, Makin Love. Are you ready for another Alive 2 reference? Alright, you know what's going to come, so I'll just save it. That opening guitar, like yeah, it's great. It is absolutely fantastic. Heavily repetitive, but as I've just alluded to, the guitars are absolutely killer on this track. Another killer Ace Frehley guitar solo. Alright, Ace Frehley might not be up there with the best guitarists in the world, but it really suits the Kiss sound. A lot of his guitar solos short and sweet, never overstaying their welcome. And to finish off the album, another solid 9 out of 10. I've written in my notes here that while I was listening to the album, obviously I was listening to it on the vinyl, and I'll just show the vinyl quickly, why not? A very short album, it feels like. I know that Dress to Kill was particularly short, just on the classic Casablanca label there. Try and get it close to the camera, there you go. That was side 2, side 1 obviously fairly similar. But this feels like a really short album. You know, having to change the side every 15 minutes, the pains of owning vinyl, right? But this just felt really short. But surprisingly, it's actually shorter than it's longer, beg your pardon, than The next album, Love Gun. Well, especially when you stop the vinyl a few minutes early when Then She Kissed Me comes on. Oh, God. Just see my Love Gun review for that. But this is a solid, consistent album. It really saw Kiss at the height of the popularity. And this comes out after the averaging of all the tracks at an 8.4 out of 10. Again, solid, consistent. I think this album's a little bit of an underrated gem. Certainly when compared to Destroyer and Love Gun. I think the two albums that surround this are always given a little bit more credit. Don't know why. Certainly wasn't due to album sales, but when I listen to other people, they certainly seem to give it more credit, and, you know, it might be a bit more mainstream, who knows, but this is another solid, consistent album, maybe because this hasn't got as many of the hits on it, of course. You've got Dr. Love, which is played at the concert. You've got Hard Luck Woman, which was a fairly successful track, but obviously on Destroyer, you've got Detroit Rock City, you've got Beth, you've got Shout It Out Loud, Do You Love Me, all Kiss staples. And then on Love Gun, you've got the title track, Christine 16. I'm trying to think now, my mind's gone completely blank. Of course, not Do You Love Me, I Stole Your Love, that's the one. But on those albums, there are more concert staples. Of course, on Destroyer, God of Thunder as well, which is a real a real concert staple and a Gene Simmons classic. By the way, I listened to the Paul Stanley demo of that a few weeks ago. That was dreadful. I'm glad Gene Simmons sung that on Destroyer. But yeah, I really love this album, as I love all of the classic albums. What do you think of this fifth Kiss album? A good album. I really enjoy it, and I've really enjoyed listening to it and talking about it to you guys today. I've had a couple of busy weeks at work. That's why the content's not been as quick as it has recently. But fortunately, I've got a couple of weeks off work, and I'm hoping to get back into this. I really enjoy it, and it seems that you guys do too. So if you have enjoyed this one, leave a thumbs up down below. Comment your thoughts as well. Any album suggestions, I'm happy to go through if I know the album pretty well. Or you might be waiting a while for me to get acquainted for the album. But yeah, leave a like, comment down below your thoughts, and subscribe, of course, for regular music content. Thank you for your company today. I've been Toby from TIJ Music, and I will see you guys in the next video of mine. Goodbye for now.